Hey there, welcome to another episode of Savor Food and Body. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving and had a lot of delicious food and hopefully some food peace to go along with it. And as I mentioned in the show last week, we were going to dive into satisfaction this week, and the holidays are a perfect time to talk about the satisfaction principle of intuitive eating, because there's usually a wide variety of foods out there and foods that you don't normally eat throughout the rest of the year for whatever reason. So this week I've been talking about satisfaction a lot with clients, and we've been getting into a lot of the nuances around satisfaction. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit more today and talk about how there's many different types of satisfaction or areas that we can find satisfaction in our life. Of course, here we're talking about food primarily, and so talking about taste satisfaction, but then also kind of the more advanced level of satisfaction is incorporating both gentle nutrition and body respect when it comes to satisfaction. And I know we haven't quite talked about those principles yet, and we will, so I'll just briefly today touch on that advanced level of satisfaction. So first of all, how do we even find satisfaction with food? If you've been in and out of yo-yo diets for many years, it can be really hard to even know, what do you like about food? What is satisfying about eating certain foods over others? And on top of that, we have the diet culture messaging that says that pleasure and satisfaction with eating is indulgent and sinful. And as I was just writing in my monthly newsletter, this year we have the additional diet culture bonus of putting stress on folks for eating highly pleasurable foods and talking about adding on additional weight because it's COVID. So I'm not going to glorify it by mentioning the phrase that was created during this pandemic in terms of gaining weight, but I'm sure you've heard it, and maybe you've even experienced the fear of, I don't want that to be me during this pandemic. So all of that diet culture messaging really steals away from your ability to find satisfaction with food. So how do we get that back? And this is really kind of a core principle with intuitive eating. In fact, I think about it as the hub of intuitive eating. So as some of you know, I'm an avid cyclist. It's one of the ways that I find joy in moving my body. And so I really like the analogy of the hub of a wheel. So if you think about the hub of a wheel, right, it's the inside of the wheel, and all of the spokes radiate out from that. So if we think about the principles of intuitive eating as a wheel, as a holistic wheel, the middle of that wheel is the hub, and that's satisfaction. So without satisfaction, it can be hard to feel our fullness. It can be hard to feel hunger or even think about, like, what are we hungry for, without really knowing what types of foods taste satisfying to us, what type of eating experiences are satisfying to us. So it's really important to spend some time with your practice, your intuitive eating practice, your savor food and body practice, spending some time getting to know satisfaction and finding it. And as we'll get into in other episodes, finding satisfaction with food oftentimes brings up some maybe dissatisfaction with your body, and maybe even some fear around, well, if I find all this satisfaction with food, am I going to keep eating more than I want to, and I'm going to keep gaining weight? And then if I gain weight, what's that going to do to my health? What's that going to do to my worth as a person? And of course, you can probably guess my answer to all of those, in that it's not going to do necessarily anything to your health, and it's definitely not going to do anything to your worth as a person if you end up gaining weight. So I want you to recognize if those thoughts come up for you while you're hearing me say, go find satisfaction with food, and recognize that those thoughts are coming from our culture that demonizes pleasurable eating experiences and ties them to negative health outcomes and or body changes that are viewed negatively. So all of that aside, in order to find satisfaction, the simplest way is to tune into your sensory desires. So what tastes, what flavors, what textures, what temperatures do you like when you're eating? This time of year there can be a lot of textures going on, I find, whether thing from crunchy holiday cookies or gooey fudge. My mom used to make fudge that had a lot of goo factor to it, which made it delicious. So thinking about kind of test driving this sensory experience while you have all these holiday foods going on in your eating experiences these days. So once you can focus on, the more tactile, like I said, the smell, the taste, the textures, the temperatures, and also the plating. I think this is an important part that people don't often think about, and maybe it's part of my culinary background that I think about the plating aspect. But how is the food showing up on the plate in front of you or bowl? Or if you're doing takeout from local restaurants or food trucks or delis, to support the local culinary industry in your area, thinking about what does it look like when you go to pick it up? What does that plating look like? And when you're plating for yourself, thinking about how does your eye see that food first, and what makes food look enticing to you? Is it the just right amount of browning on some toast, kind of that golden color with toast versus charcoal brown with toast, which I've been getting more of as I'm learning a new convection oven in my house. Thinking about that back to Thanksgiving. So when you talk about plating at a meal that has a lot of browns, a lot of beige, and maybe some white when it comes to potatoes, how does that look to your mind's eye in terms of whether you're going to be satisfied with the meal or not? Like when you only see one color, does that matter to you? Do you like to see a variety of colors on your plate? Do you like to have a variety of foods when you sit down and eat? So one of my clients this week was describing that she felt for her satisfaction came from having a wide variety of foods and therefore having a wide variety of nutrients coming in too, both from really nutrient dense foods and then also some fun foods that she just likes the taste of. Having all of those together at the same meal with full permission, remember, as we've talked about before, full permission is really important here, then she's more satisfied with the meal. So again, turning into those sensory experiences can really be an important first step to finding satisfaction with food. Now there is a caveat with all of this, and I want to put, have like a big caution warning across the video here, in that your sensory experience with food can get hijacked by diet mentality. Let's just be straight up honest with that. If you have spent years in yo-yo dieting and weight cycling, you are initially going to have thoughts like the food police when you sit down and eat something that maybe you're working on having full permission with that food, and it is really delicious to you and it is super satisfying, but you may still have those thoughts of like, you shouldn't be eating this. It's going to affect your health, or it's going to affect your weight, or whatever. Those are food policing thoughts. The flip side of that is that you could also experience what I call the diet rebel thoughts, meaning you sit down to that plate of deliciousness that you think is going to be really satisfying to you, and the diet rebel says, oh, go on, have another helping of it. Like, let's just finish it off. Like, you're not dieting anymore. What does it matter? And then you can end up eating beyond your comfortable fullness, and then you really don't feel well and you have a stomach ache, and then that body shame and blame thought cycle can start, and going, oh, forget this satisfaction thing, like what's my body gonna do in the morning, and all of that. And that's the real deal. Like when that diet rebel is running the show, we can easily eat beyond the fullness that we feel comfortable with. And when we get to that point, kind of that sick feeling of fullness, it's not satisfying. We don't remember those first few bites of the food and what the tastes and textures were like and how we were experiencing. We just remember the stomach ache that we have. And body shame and blame too. That's even louder. So as you're exploring these ways of finding satisfaction with food from that sensory perspective, I want you to just notice, again, lots of curiosity, tons of compassion, noticing what diet mentality thoughts are coming up for you. I also want you to notice if there's any seasonal condition thoughts coming up for you. So I was just talking about this with a colleague yesterday, and we're going to do, I'm going to be a guest on her live video show in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be sure to let you all know about that so you can join in as well. And we were talking about how during the holidays, it's really easy to say like, oh yeah, go ahead and have whatever you want to, because come January, you're not going to have access to the fudge or the chocolate balls or the pecan pie or the mashed potatoes made with cream or the creamy soups or whatever. So again, here's kind of where seasonal conditional eating kind of gets in cahoots with the diet rebel. So the diet rebel lets you go like, yeah, go ahead and have whatever you want to and feel stuffed. And the conditional permission goes, because you're going to change it all come January. You're going to start the next best wellness diet plan come January. So I want you to just be aware of those thoughts that come up. And again, with curiosity, no need to judge yourself for them, but just notice that they're there. And notice that they can make it more difficult to find satisfaction with our eating and the whole experience in general, as well as turning into those sensory desires with food. There was a blog post that I put out earlier this week on even some more nuances and details with that, and you can get that by going to alpinenutrition.org/blog, and you can find it'll be the very top post there, so you can take a look at that. And then I just want to say one word about that more advanced level of satisfaction in case this is where you're at, meaning that you've been practicing intuitive eating for quite some time, and maybe you're wanting to know, how does intuitive eating kind of tie to maybe some health goals that you have, and not diet external rules, health goals, but maybe you've had some lab results come back and they weren't where you wanted them to be, and you want to know how to not diet to fix them, but you want to know how do you incorporate the intuitive eating practice and really hard work you've been doing into also being mindful of whatever your lab values were. And so with this, I'm primarily talking about cholesterol levels, blood sugar levels. So you can definitely incorporate intuitive eating into that, and satisfaction. And as I was describing it to a client today, we want to have both. We want to have both taste satisfaction, which is what I was talking about with the sensory desires. That's more that mouthfeel satisfaction, and pairing it with the body respect, gentle nutrition satisfaction. So again, that's a more advanced part of this satisfaction work, and it's taking into context that part of taking care of your body and body respect is having blood levels of blood glucose and cholesterol that are in healthy ranges for you. And that's another important part too. You may not fit the exact ideals that maybe your doctor wants, but if you're consistently kind of in the same spot with your blood glucose and with your cholesterol, maybe it's been trending a little bit higher, but it's in somewhat of a consistent pattern for you, that's unique to you. And so you may not be someone that's going to fit into the extreme low of any of those healthy ranges for blood sugar or cholesterol. So that's okay. That's just your body. So I digress. But in a nutshell, learning to honor what your body needs and how that shows up on those very scientific, objective, lab values is important also. So the intuitive eating and savor food and body is not about the fuck it plan when it comes to food and your body. It's very much also honoring that blood chemistry that's going on for you too. And that can be done without going on any crazy restrictive diets. In fact, those diets might even screw up your lab values even more. So coming back to the satisfaction, yes, you can have the taste satisfaction and that sensory satisfaction and be satisfied by stopping when it feels comfortable to you, or having a smaller piece of the lasagna and having larger salad with more fiber in it if, you know, cholesterol is and blood sugar are important things for you to be monitoring to take care of yourself. And if that's important to you, you can do both. You can both have the food that you want that's super satisfying, and you can take care of your health from the metabolic panel is usually what the blood test is called. You can take care of yourself from that regard too. So again, super nuanced, and it is a little bit hard to talk about that generally. It's much easier when you're doing one-on-one work with someone. So I encourage you, if that is something that's important to you, to have that metabolic health and not go on a diet and not be crazy restricted and not go down that road again, then definitely get in touch with a dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and a Health at Every Size dietitian, and they can help you navigate that. So that concludes our discussion on satisfaction. Remember that it's the hub of all things intuitive eating. It is the focal point. And as we go forward in the remaining principles, you're going to see how satisfaction kind of runs the show. And I think we've talked about hunger and fullness, but maybe not necessarily as connected to satisfaction. So we will get into that at another episode another time. So I wish you a great weekend, and I will talk to you again next week. Take care.